Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Hopefully we're going to finish now the 7th Perek in Shemona Prakim. And so we're concluding this Perek that is, the subject of this Perek is the Nevi'im. Nevuah as a, because we explored in length Vrumi is back. Where were you? Didn't see him for a couple of days. Anyway, whoever wants to join us live, the number is, we're live every day, 1:30. We try to keep it 15 minutes. I think the last time we were successful in keeping it to 15 minutes was quite a while ago. But we average about, 20-25 minutes. So you could send a message to 732-444-8549, and we'll add you to the group. We're live on Zoom. So we are concluding now the 7th Perek of Shemona Prakim. We have to start thinking about what we're going to do afterwards. So yesterday we saw mamish tremendous things yesterday. So I want to go back a little because I don't think we gave it enough. So yesterday it's a very sensitive topic because really what we're discussing is the various different levels and experiences of the Nevi'im and the way they perceive and the lenses through which they see their Nevuah, their prophecy. And what the Rambam says is that when we say that certain Nevi'im have more barriers and other Nevi'im have less barriers, to the extent that Moshe Rabbeinu sees his Nevuah through a transparent a mirror, like a transparent barrier, so that means is that a Navi, so there are a few prerequisites for someone to be a Navi, and that we explored yesterday in length. But what he said was, yesterday the Rambam said that don't think that a Navi needs to be perfect in his midas, because even though he must be in general, obviously, he has to be someone with tremendously refined character. If not, he's going to be blinded by the amount of barriers that he has. But a Navi is someone who refined all his characteristics and his personality traits. And therefore, his personality does not come in the way of him and his Nevuah. Yet, still, it could be that a Navi is not 100% perfect. And therefore, his lens is going to be a little murky. It's going to be a little cloudy. The perspective, the prism in which he sees his Nevuah will be somewhat, clouded. And that's why, he says, you see Nevi'im, that many of the Nevi'im have limitations and they have certain things that they weren't perfect in that regard. Now, obviously, we're talking about things that, halavai, we in our whole life, we should do a mitzvah with a dveikus that all these tzaddikim, did their imperfections. But still, we're talking about these tzaddikim, we're not talking about us. And the idea is that even though a Navi, someone like Eliyahu Navi and David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech and Yaakov Avinu, and people who were tremendous people, but their Nevuah they saw through their own. Every person experiences Nevuah through his own self, right? He is the channel, he is the vessel, and because a person is not perfect, most people are very far from perfect. But even Nevi'im, ein adam tzadik barat she'asta v'le'yachta, and so because this, let's take Shlomo HaMelech for an example. So we're going to take, we'll take Shlomo HaMelech and David as two examples for two slightly different ideas that the Rambam says. And that is Shlomo HaMelech's imperfection, the way the Rambam said yesterday, was the excessive desire, right? That's Shlomo HaMelech's imperfection. Now, when Shlomo HaMelech is going to see Nevuah, it's going to be limited. It's going to be, his lens is going to be somewhat murky because that part of his personality, that part of his character is going to be in between him and his Nevuah, right? That's sort of going to cloud somewhat his perception of Nevuah. Now, obviously, it's still very clear and it's very holy, and but that is what's going to be in his way. David HaMelech, what's going to be in his way is rage, right? The reason why he can't build a Beis Hamikdash is because he shed a lot of blood, which has to do with excessive rage and whatever that is. Ruthlessness, not rage, ruthlessness. Now, The question, though, is we ask that David HaMelech, and the Rambam himself says, David HaMelech didn't do anything wrong, didn't act wrongly with his anger. It's not like he killed people on the street, just the opposite. He used his ruthlessness to punish Rishaim, and that was the right thing at the right time, which, as we said yesterday, if he would come to the Rambam and he would ask him what to do with these Rishaim, you need to treat them in a certain way. Says the Rambam nonetheless. It's not a punishment. It's not. Sometimes, when we're talking about Shlomo Melech and that entire area, that might be somewhat that has to do with the shortcoming on his level, right? And that's where his kaviyachol, his, obviously it's something we don't really have a business to talk about, but his shortcomings in a certain way those are his barriers. But it doesn't have to be like that, because even Nevi'im, they did the right thing. For instance, David HaMelech, who used his rage, his excessive, his ruthlessness, he used it in the right way. Eliyahu Hanavi, that was a kanoi, and he used his anger in the right way to punish Rishaim and Achav and so on and so forth. Still, the fact of the matter is that because it's not a punishment, it's not a flaw, it's a barrier. And someone who doesn't have that barrier, because his character is refined to the extent that he doesn't have any of his own, it's like, it sounds like David HaMelech had this characteristic of ruthlessness. Now, whereas most people, it would come out in using it against their fellow man. Even someone who works on himself, it would still be something that comes in his way. David HaMelech never came in his way in Avos Hashem. Just the opposite. He channeled that completely to do the right thing and to punish Rishon. Still, in his persona, because there was this midah, that clouded that was in his way. So that's the first point. And then the Rambam says that and then the Rambam says a very interesting thing. He says, so he sort of proves the idea of, you want to come back soon? Come back soon. So the Rambam proves that being imperfect does not completely put a Novi in a position where he can't give a Nevuah. So the Rambam says, because we see that there are very specific things that take away someone's ability to prophesize, and that is anger, atzvus and atzlus, right? Laziness, anger, and sadness, right? So you see, like Yaakov Avinu, who's very saddened by the fact that Yosef wasn't there for 22 years; he didn't have Nevuah. Or you see that by the Chorban, by Baruch ben Neriah, I don't think the Rambam even brings this example. And you see when Elisha got angry, he couldn't have Nevuah. So you see that only these things completely handicap a Navi to the point that he can't experience Nevuah. What do you see from that? You see that all the other things, like excessive desire, or a mid of ruthlessness, or a mid of anger like Eliyahu Hanavi, which is almost like hysteria, because you see Eliyahu Hanavi, it didn't really disturb his ability to have Nevuah. Let me just look inside to make sure that I'm not. Yeah, look, there's a very interesting steer. Look, that we could ask, and that's sort of going to bring us to prove the point. When he gives the list of everyone's limitations in their nevuah, what was Eliyahu Hanavi's? Was Eliyahu Hanavi one of them, or I just made it up? Oh, maybe I just made it up. Oh no, he says it. So Eliyahu Hanavi would get upset. Okay, so Eliyahu Hanavi, he says that was his chisaron. Yet when he gives a list of the things that completely put a Navi in a position where he can't say any nevuah. So there you have Elisha getting angry at the Yoshafat, and he can't give nevuah until they bring him music that calms his mind, and he gives nevuah. So what is it? Is nevuah something like by Eliyahu that comes in his way of experiencing nevuah, or is it something that a Navi, when he's angry, can't say nevuah at all? And then also we should ask, according to the Rambam, what is it? What is it about sadness that is debilitating and completely puts a Navi in a position where he can't say any Nevuah, and therefore Yaakov Avinu for 22 years didn't have any Nevuah, but someone who has an issue like a ruthlessness issue could say Nevuah, just that's going to be in the way. So we have to understand what it is, and I think it's very self-explanatory once you think about it. It's very simple. What the Rambam is trying to say is like this. A Navi having certain shortcomings in his midas. Now, obviously, we're talking about these big tzaddikim, so they're slight shortcomings. They're not something that are completely like in our experience, obviously, where we're extremely, extremely far from these things. So our anger and our lust and our greed and our self-centered selfishness, all these things by us, as we explained, we have so much to work on, so we're so far from it that we're completely blind. But these Nevi'im, in general, all their personality traits and all their characteristics are extremely refined, but we're talking about a slight, murkiness. So when that the Rambam says, dealing with your own personality and having certain non-perfections don't come in the way. But that is when we're talking about personality traits. When we're talking about anger as a personality trait, the tendency to become angry, the tendency to have excessive desire, the tendency to be afraid of things that maybe shouldn't make you afraid. These things are shortcomings, and the Navi will experience this in the Nevuah through that prism and through that barrier. That's how he's going to experience the Nevuah. But when a Navi is in a state of mourning, in a state of sadness, in a state of anger, when he is physically in that, mentally and emotionally in that state, then he's incapable of having Nevuah. So they're two very different things. There's anger as a personality trait, that is Exhibit A is Eliyahu Navi, to the point where Hashem says it's coming in your way so much, and your Nevuah is reflecting that so much that, I'm demoting you, and I have to take you up. And versus Elisha, which Hashem doesn't take away his job, but Elisha's problem wasn't that he had a tendency to get angry. Elisha's problem was that he was in a very angry state, and therefore he didn't have the peace of mind and the connection and the harmony and what it takes for a Navi to give his Nevuah. So that's something that we need to talk about. So again, Yaakov Avinu, when he was mourning Yosef, that wasn't something wrong. It wasn't a problem in his personality. It was the right thing to do at the right time. It was beautiful. And by the way, that in itself isn't even a barrier. That's something that's the right thing. And that's not, mourning is not something that would come in the way of like a personality trait that a Navi would see the Nevuah through that lens. But mourning takes over a person to the degree that a person is just he's disabled. Someone that's mourning or angry can't bring himself together to the point where he can say Nevuah. And the Rambam Nevuchim says that that's why, and we're going to see later in the end of the Pirkei, that in Chazal's times there were people, the Chazal said, that were on the level that they could have been Nevi'im. Hillel Azak and others, that they were mamish in the madrega that they could have been Nevi'im. Why aren't they Nevi'im? Why is there no Navi today? Says the Rambam that he thinks, I think he says in Nevuchim, that it's because we're in Galus. And because we're in Galus, then Klal Yisrael collectively is in a mourning state. We're in an angry state, we're in a mourning state. And therefore, even these tzaddikim are big tzaddikim, and they have no barriers. They are mamish, tremendous tzaddikim, that their characters are refined and their minds are developed. And they are so connected to Hashem with every fiber of their being that they would have been a Navi 2,000 years ago. Because 2,500 years ago, because then, since the reason why the institution of Nevuah is discontinued is not because there aren't any great people. It's because everyone is in a state of mourning and anger and schlepped down, and therefore we just can't get our act together in a way that that we could have a Navi today. Which is a fascinating point. So now let's go to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, so what we saw is that every imperfection that a Navi has is sort of a screen. In between is another screen and through which he sees his Nevuah, and that's why it gets slightly murkier. So if a Navi has 2 areas in which he struggles, or 3 areas that are by him not completely refined, then he will see his Nevuah through that, and that's why his Nevuah is going to be it's going to be in a non-translucent barrier. So that's what the Rambam says. But Moshe Rabbeinu's every fiber of his being was completely refined, and there was nothing between him and there was nothing inside of him that was imperfect. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu knew that there was no barrier, there was no screen that he didn't tear apart. That basically every midah of his was refined completely. And he was the most perfect human being because every part, whether it was in the intellectual virtues or it was the moral and ethical and personality virtues, he excelled and he attained every one of these virtues, and therefore he was the most perfect person that ever lived. And that's why he asked Hashem, so he wanted, and he asked Hashem, he wanted to comprehend Hashem's existence in essence. Right? Because he tells Hashem, Hareini nos kvodecha. What does that? Show me, reveal to me your glory. What does it mean, Hareini nos kvodecha? Says the Rambam, Hareini nos kvodecha means, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I want to experience your existence in its raw form, right? I want to know you in your essence. Because I am in a matzav that I don't have anything separating me from you, so therefore I want to know you in your essence. What does Hashem answer him? And Hashem tells him it's not possible because you're right. You don't. He says, "What's separating you from me? You're right. There's nothing in your. You don't have any ego. You don't have any personality problems. You don't have anything. You are the most perfect human being. But you know what's separating me from you? Your physicality. The fact that you are a physical mind and a physical body. That is the only barrier," says the Rambam, and that is the Spaklari Amir. Moshe Rabbeinu saw, perceived, and experienced Hashem through a translucent screen. What was that translucent screen? His own being. Moshe Rabbeinu's being was pure, was completely pure, but because he still had that barrier, even Moshe Rabbeinu sees Hashem through a barrier, through an espaklaria, through a screen, and that screen, yet it was translucent completely, but that screen still can't experience the infinite. And that's what Hashem says, that you are a finite being, and therefore you can't, as long as you're alive, you can't experience my existence in its raw kaviyachal, obviously, my existence in its essence, because you're still finite. Says the Rambam, it's not possible because he's a seichel matzah b'chomer, because his mind is still in a physical confines. Because you're human. So you see that there was nothing in between Moshe Rabbeinu and the Hasaga, and between Moshe Rabbeinu and comprehension of Hashem's true existence, besides that one single translucent, transparent screen, and that is the human mind, the mind in which he sees Hashem. But Hashem did, Hashem did concede sort of to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he did give him a greater hasaga after he asked this, and that's what Hashem says. V'risas achayra, and the Rambam says, it says within the parasha, v'risas achayra fanai lo yirau. What does your fanai lo yirau mean? So he says like this: when you see a person in his face, then obviously you recognize him, and that's how you recognize a person. You see his face, and just like everyone else, you see someone on the street. If you see him face to face, then you have no question if this is the person you met. There's no questions left. You see him, this is the person you know. Versus if you see a person from the back of his head, then you don't know. You're not 100% sure. You're not 100% clear because you didn't see everything there is to see. When Hashem says, it means you can't see me face to face. You can't see my existence as it is truly, because you still have that one single barrier, and that's not something you can solve, because as long as you're a physical person that's alive, then you can't comprehend the divine. But you'll see this madrega of achayrai, which is the highest madrega any person ever experienced in Nevuah. And by the way, no person will ever experience, there will never be a Navi like Moshe Rabbeinu that has this asaga of Kavod Hashem, of V'reisas achayrai, and that is a testament to Moshe Rabbeinu's greatness and Moshe Rabbeinu's not only greatness, that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is categorically a different type of Navi. It's not like every other Navi is on a scale closer and further from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu's experience of Nevuah is in such a different level of clarity, and it's not only like seeing the same thing and through clearer and clearer and clearer lenses, and then there's one Navi that's Moshe Rabbeinu 2.0. That's not. Yeshua is not Moshe Rabbeinu 2.0. Yeshua, who's probably the greatest Navi besides Moshe Rabbeinu, is not, Pnei Yeshua Pnei Levana. The Levana isn't the second son. They're two completely different things. And that's really the inherent difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and the other Nevi'im, is that the level to which Moshe Rabbeinu was perfected in his mind and in his midas was to such a high degree that he was zoichet to see V'reisas achayrai, and that's why it's one of the Yud Gimel Ekrim that there will never be another Navi like Moshe Rabbeinu. Because if there would be, by the way, then he could give us another Torah. Right? That's why it's so important. Because what we always say is that because you didn't see what Moshe Rabbeinu saw, that you are not worthy of, and you don't have the credibility to to revert or to give to continue the Torah or whatever it is, because Moshe Rabbeinu, who was in such a experience as Nebuah, in a way of Zeh Dover, that he can tell you that this is what Hashem says, this, not Be'erech, not Koi, not this, and no other Navi could ever speak like that. So therefore, this is Moshe Rabbeinu's asaga that he was zoichet to see, and no one could ever come to this madrega, and that is what Verisa Sachara means. And the Rambam says, I still have to discuss this in length in the Sefer Nevuah that I'm going to write, which he never wrote, but a big part of it at least is in Mar Nevuchim Chelik Beis. There's a nice few chapters there about Nevuah, which maybe that is the book of Nevuah that the Rambam eventually wrote. Now, says the Rambam, V'kivan sheyadu chachamim. Kishnei min Allah, fine. So to convey this idea that what makes a person a Navi is the refinement of someone's character and personality traits and the development of his mind in the metaphysics and the Chachmas Hashem. That's why Chazal say on certain Tanaim and Amiram that they could have been Nevi'im, and even sometimes they compare them to Moshe Rabbeinu. Chazal say that he was worthy, that he could have had Nevuah like Moshe Rabbeinu. It says the Rambam, by the way, by the way, don't think Chaz v'Shalom that it means that Chazal were comparing him to Moshe Rabbeinu. They weren't comparing him to Moshe Rabbeinu. What they were doing is they were drawing a certain parallel between his state of refinement of his character to Moshe Rabbeinu, but to the idea, not obviously of the it wasn't a comparison. It wasn't a comparison. The way they translate it is, they only compared those chachamim, I think, Hillel to Moshe Rabbeinu, but they didn't equate him to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the idea. And the same thing is on Yeshua ben Nun. So, and that's the end of this parak. So, what we saw over here is that the goal, and we have to see the last few Shurim as one unit, and that the goal of working on our midas is we have one goal, and that is to attain a connection to Hashem. And the way we connect to Hashem is through our mind. But our midas get in between our mind and Hashem. So that's why we have to work on our avonos. What are these avonos? Our midas. And before every single shortcoming that a person has, he needs to refine, because that will come in the way of him and his understanding and experience of Hashem's presence. Now, what the Rambam says is that is something that every person has to do and put himself in that position, that he should technically be able to be a Navi. Now, you won't be a Navi. You won't be a Navi just like Hillel HaZakon, and you're extremely far from Hillel HaZakon. But just like these, the Tanaim and Amiram, that what Chazal are trying to tell us when they compare them to Moshe Rabbeinu, obviously they don't equate them, that's the beautiful word. They don't equate them to Moshe Rabbeinu, they compare them to Moshe Rabbeinu, and that is that they say that just like Moshe Rabbeinu was completely refined in every part of his being, to the point that he had Nevuah, so too there were other Chachmei Yisrael that they also put themselves in a position that they could have Nevuah, and really it's incumbent upon every person to refine his character, every part of his character, not for the sake of refining your midas alone. That's not the point. The point is that you should refine your midas, and you should be goal oriented, to also develop your mind in deep Chachmas Hashem, that you should be in a position to connect Hashem through your mind. And that is really why we're here, and that's really why the entire Torah was given. The entire Torah was given because the Torah will train you that you should be in the middle path. And if you follow the Torah, you don't have to do anything more extreme than that. You just have to follow the letter of the law. And if you follow the letter of the law, that will train you, that will put you through a certain boot camp, and that will shape your character, that you should be in a position that you'll work on your midas, and once you work on your midas, then you can work on your mind, and ultimately reach the tachlis of why you're a person, right? Because that is ultimately, the das is what makes you uniquely human, and uniquely, that is the tachlis of why we're here. So, if we work through that, then we will reach our tachlis, and that is sort of the point of the entire Pirkei Avos, is to refine our character. So that is what we will see eventually. And now we finish the 7th parak. We're left with the 8th parak, which I think is the longest, which really doesn't have much to do with anything we saw till now. So I think till now, even though we had, the main thesis of Shemona Prakim and certain ideas that the Rambam worked through, but from now on, it's really, the last parak is a very long parak, completely philosophical, you could say, and it deals with a very serious question. That's the question of Bechira, but it's still not. I don't know how much it's negate. Meaning, I think if you take Aleph to Zion, that's much more meat and potatoes of Shemona Prakim, and Pirkei is sort of an afterthought. But it's a very, very important Perik. We'll explore much in the next few days.